In today's video, I'm going to talk about the 10 ways you can get your garden ready for the cold winter. Preparing your garden for winter is important because it not only helps your plants survive the winter, but it also helps them thrive in spring. The first tip is to clean up your garden. It is important to remove dead plants, fallen leaves, and any debris that can harbor pests or diseases. This prevents buildup of any problems over the winter and also something that you might see in spring. A lot of the pests go in hibernation during winter and their life cycle starts all over again in spring if they are found in the leaves near the roots or in your soil. So it's important to remove all of this debris before your ground freezes or is covered with snow. Prune and trim. Cut back any dried or overgrown branches on the shrubs and trees in your garden. This is a great time to prune your perennials at ground level or up to the recommended height for your plant. This not only helps reducing the risk of diseases, but also encourages healthy and vibrant growth in spring. Mulch. Apply a layer of mulch around the base of the plant to help them retain moisture. I will admit that I am not the best when it comes to applying mulch, but this year I'm planning to do a better job of applying mulch to my own plants so that it can help them retain some of the moisture and not dry out during the winter. Try using organic materials for mulch like wood chips, straw, or even old trimmings from your garden. Mulching your garden also helps prevent weeds from taking hold. And I've seen this in my garden because even though I don't mulch the garden beds, I have stone gravel around all my other plants in the garden. And that has been such a lifesaver because I rarely have any weeds popping up. And this is year 3 and it has worked really wonders in my garden. Protect delicate plants. This is a great time to bring in some of the delicate plants that you're either growing for the first time or that have not taken up its growth spurt and have started growing into larger plants, and either cover them up while they're outside or put them in a grow tunnel or even bring them inside your home. A great example would be if you're growing herbs like basil and you want to overwinter them and don't want your basil to die, or you're growing any of your citruses that don't do as well outside in your garden, I would bring them indoor into your home at this point. Watering. Now, it is important to keep watering your plants even in the dry spells, because if you're living in an area like I am in California where we have drought and don't get any snow or rarely get any rain, well, this year was an exception, but for most years we rarely get any rain. So it's important for me to keep watering my plants throughout the winter. And what I tend to do in the winter is I tend to reduce the amount of watering that I would have compared to the summer months. So if I am watering them maybe once in 3 days, I go down to maybe once in a week and still try to kind of deep water the plants so that they do a lot better and survive better. But I tend to reduce the cycle of watering for each of the plants. I kind of noticed a big difference just 2 weeks ago because I was getting some repairs done in my irrigation system. There was a leak and I was trying to get it fixed. But during that time, I had shut off the entire irrigation system. I was hand watering my vegetable beds, but I was not watering so much the rest of the roses and the citruses. And I thought maybe they'll be fine. And the work lasted for a lot longer than a week. And I think it was 2 weeks in, and I started to notice that the leaves have started to lose their shine a little bit. Once the work was done, I immediately started them on a cycle of once a week of deep watering. And watering might not be a great advice for people who have snow, but for people who don't have snow, or if you have not received snow yet and don't have any frost yet, this is a good tip to know. Fertilize. Apply a slow release, balanced organic fertilizer to your garden so that it provides them essential nutrients throughout the winter. Try to avoid any of the fertilizers that are high in nitrogen because that might lead to newer growth, and any new growth might be susceptible to damage from frost. It's important to fertilize them with a well-balanced fertilizer that might not cause spurts of growth in the plants. Wrap or cover plants. If your garden is getting really bad frost or cold winds, wrap the more vulnerable plants in burlap or frost blankets. Wrap these around the plants during the night so that they are protected with the worst of the cold. But during the day, you can remove them to increase airflow and also provide sunlight to the plant. Prepare the garden beds. Remove any of the weeds and amend your soil with compost, because now my vegetable planters are drained of the soil and compost that I had put in at the beginning of the season. I try to replenish it with compost right now, and if I am planning to plant any of the plants that are cool season vegetables, this amendment would also help growing those vegetables. Clean and store your garden tools. This is a great time to clean and sharpen all the gardening tools, especially your pruners. That is one of the things on my to-do list for the winter, because I don't get a chance to clean it during the year, and this is a perfect time to do that. But also remember to store the rest of the tools that you might not be using indoors so that they are not damaged by the weather during the winter. And drain any of the hoses that you might have of water so that they might not get damaged because of freezing. Planning for spring. This is the perfect time to plan for your spring garden and think of all the vegetables that you want to grow in the garden during that time. I usually try to make a review of my garden from this year on paper and think about all the vegetables that I grew this year that I was successful in, that I liked, that I didn't like, that were too crazy and hard to grow, and then I prioritize those for next year. I'll try to do a more detailed video talking about how to do this, but one of the great examples this year for my garden was the amount of grape tomatoes and cherry tomatoes that I planted. I had a bumper crop with them, and it was insane how many tomatoes I used throughout the year and how much money I saved on these tomatoes. I use a lot of tomatoes in my cooking every week, and it was important to me to kind of reduce my grocery bill by growing my own tomatoes during the summer months. What I didn't realize, and what I had not planned for, that I would also get harvests in October, November, and even this week in December. I had a small harvest, but enough that I didn't have to get tomatoes for a whole week. So that was a huge win for me. So this is a great time to review your own garden, how it performed, what did well, but also try to think of any new experiments that you want to do in your garden. Like this year, I experimented with okra for the first time growing in my garden. And oh my gosh, it was so much fun to grow it. But I think it didn't produce as much as I would have liked, because it was producing one-off okras in like maybe 2-3 days apart. Like I was getting about 4 or 5 okras, and that was not enough to make a vegetable all on its own. But I was easily adding it to soups and stews that I was making. So if I have to grow okra next year, I might have to plant more plants. Another success story I had was with the new melon that I grew in my garden. I have never ever grown melons, and this is the first time I grew them. And although it was a little hit or miss, because I was growing a variety that's completely new to me and there are things I could have done better with it, I still had 2 Kajari melons that I grew in this tiny, tiny space in my vegetable bed. So that was another win for my garden. This is an amazing time to research new plants, plan your actual garden layout for next spring, and also make sure you get in your orders in if you have to get any spring bulbs, or if you are planning to get any specific vegetable seeds that you want to start in spring. It is important to understand that these steps will vary a little bit depending upon where you live and what kind of microclimate you have for your own garden. Because even though I grow my vegetables in a warmer zone here in Southern California, I have a microclimate because I'm closer to the ocean and I get these really, really cold ocean winds from the ocean. That can be too cold for some of the vegetables if I have not put enough thought into it. So I have to keep that in mind when I am planning the garden. For roses in my garden, there is one section of my garden that has a wind tunneling, and the roses in that section are much more infected with powdery mildew than the rest of the roses in my garden. So this also might change where you live and what are the criteria for your garden. But I would suggest thinking about that and applying different parts of these tips to your garden so that you have a very successful upcoming season in your garden. Remember that properly preparing your garden in winter is going to give you a bountiful and successful season of growing vegetables when the warmer temperatures are back. And if you're planning to add some roses in your garden and are wondering which ones to add, check out this video right here on my recommendations for my favorite roses.